Welcome back to the Spreadsheet Skunkworks, the series where we try to build a chess computer in Excel in order to understand the capabilities of Excel VBA and hopefully learn a lot in the process. If you want a full introduction to the series, you can check out the first video in the series. There'll be a playlist, a link to the playlist below this video. So let's get into the Excel file. The file is available for download. There'll be a link below the video. You can go to the website, download the file, work along with me. So how far have we got? Well, it doesn't seem like we've got that far so far, certainly nowhere near a chess computer, but we have created what looks like a chessboard. And in the most recent video, we've created a routine to position some shapes on the board, to position some pieces on the board. And that's as far as we've got so far. So what we're going to try to do this in this video is to create all of the pieces and get them all positioned on the board. So we can click a button, reset board, something like that. Click a button and all of the pieces are going to appear. Use VBA to do that. That's the aim of this video. What have we got so far that might help us? Well, we've got this position pieces routine, and this is what we worked on in the last video. Now, this routine is interacting with a table in the spreadsheet, which we'll look at in a second. And it's getting some information from the table, using that information to position the pieces on the board. On the engine tab, just outside of your screenshot, the tab's at the bottom of the screen. On the engine tab, the engine sheet, we can see we've got this table here. So the routine is taking information from this table and positioning the pieces. And of course, we're using a loop to do that. The title of the last video was the power of loops. You can see we've got a loop here, simple integer variable and a for next loop. So this is going through the loop 8 times, running through this code 8 times in order to position the 8 pieces or the 8 shapes that we've got so far. So the last video was called the power of loops. This video is about using a loop in order to achieve scale. So if we have a loop that's working well in a spreadsheet, we should aim to exploit that and scale it up and get things done really, really quickly by just scaling up that loop. That's what we're going to look to do in this video, and yeah, set up the whole chessboard. That's the aim. But first, it's been a couple of months, maybe 3 or 4 months now, since I last did a video in this series, and I really appreciated the value of well-organized code. Well, it's not perfectly organized, my code, but it's reasonably well organized. For example, coming back to the code after a few months, being able to read some of the annotations here, having informative routine names like position pieces, so having the routines named in a way that tells us what the routine does, an informative routine name. These things have been really helpful, but I did notice I haven't organized the code into named modules so far. Now, this is good coding practice generally, certainly good when we're using Excel VBA, to group routines together, routines that are doing similar things that we can group together by some kind of theme, group them together, put them in the same module, give that module a name. That's a good way for us to organize the code, going to allow us to understand where different code is, etc., etc. So I thought it would be a good stage now, a good time now, to just go back through some of the code and to put in some module names, to group these routines together and to put in some module names. Now in module 1, we've got the code from the first video, which was about coloring a single square on the chessboard. Module 2, we did the same thing in a remote way. So these routines are both about, we could say, coloring, creating the board, or coloring the squares. So the first thing I'm going to do is move the routines into the same module. So I'm just going to select all this code just outside of your screenshot, select it all the way to the bottom of the routine. Remember, you can download the file yourself, work along with me. And I'm going to Control X, cut this code, and then I'm just going to drop it in module 1. And again, this will just be outside your screenshot, but just below the existing code there. So now in module 1, I've now got 3 routines, 3 related routines. They're all about colouring squares or creating a board. So we should rename this module now, and let's call it Create Board, because these routines, these little programs we're creating, are about creating a chessboard there. So in order to rename the module, I'm just going to select the text here and create _ board. There we go. If I hit return, we can now see we've got a named module. The name of the module describes the role of the code in the module. So this is a great step to having organized code. This module 2 is now empty. Well, we've just got option explicit on its own there. So let's delete this module. Do you want to export it? No, you don't. And then what's in module 3? Well, we've got this position pieces routine that we looked at in the last video. And we've got a routine down at the bottom for deleting the shapes. So this routine we could say is to do with setting up the board or positioning the pieces. But what else have we got here? And then we've got a simple routine here to copy the shape, which I don't think is being referenced in any other routines. So yeah, it's probably a good time now. Let's just dispense with this routine. Don't think we need it anymore. So now we can get rid of a module, tidy up the code, make the whole thing easier to understand, remove module 4. Don't want to export it. So now we've gone from 4 modules to 2 modules, so already looking a lot simpler. Then this module, we're talking about positioning the pieces, and let's say set up board. That seems to be an informative name for the module. The name of the module describes the role of the code in the module. That just makes things easy to understand. Like when I got into this file today, when I was planning for this video, I wanted to get a quick overview of all the code. It was actually quite difficult to get that overview because I didn't have named modules, didn't have the routines organized into named modules, although I did do some good things like putting the annotations in there, for example. Now we've got 2 modules, the modules are both named, so this is a good step towards better organized code. So that's, the first topic of this video. Not particularly exciting, talking about organizing code, but so important in the long run. So many times I've got into a piece of work, just done lots and lots of code, different modules, and then come back to it. It's been very disorganized, very difficult to get back into it to refresh my mind. So having well-organized code, using the annotations, having informative routine names and informative names for the modules, that's going to be really helpful. So with that said, let's get on to the main purpose of the video. I'm just going to bring this across here. There we go, to give us, so you can see the Visual Basic Editor a bit better there. And the purpose of the video is, of course, to scale up this routine, position pieces routine, which works with a table here, to scale it up here in order to position all of the pieces in order to set up the board for a game. And yeah, it's so important, such a useful technique. Loops in Excel VBA, if we can exploit a loop, we can get things done so quickly. So let's look at how we're going to do that. We've got this table here. So the loop is simply working through the table, taking one row, taking that information, using it to position the pieces, going down to the next row, the third row. Currently, we're going through the loop 8 times, but we're going to have to change that, because we're now talking about 32 pieces on the chessboard at the beginning of the game. So this is what we're going to look at doing. So first, very simple. I mean, if you're trying to do a difficult coding task, always helps to break it down into simple steps. Now, clearly, we're going to have to build up this table. That's going to be a sensible, simple first step that we can do in order to access, to get started with this task. So currently we've got all of the white pawns here. So we're going to need 8 more white pieces. So I'm just going to Control C and then Control V, copy paste white down there. And then we've got pawns, and then I'm going to go from left to right on the chessboard. So let's say white rook 1, and then white knight 1, white bishop 1, white queen, and then white king. Come down a little bit, There we go. And then it's going to be white bishop it is, 2, and then white knight, 2, and white rook, 2. There we go. Okay, so we've got all of the pieces in there. And yeah, I mean, at this point, it'd be a good idea just to check how many pieces we've got there. So just highlighted that area. And I can see down at the bottom outside of your screenshot, it says count 16, just down at the bottom in Excel. So I can see I've got 16 pieces there, 16 pieces on the chessboard. So that's just a quick check I can do to make sure I did that correctly. Then we've got to think about the positioning. Now remember, the positioning here, the way it's working, is we've got to say how many rows down from an anchor point this piece is. Let's go back to the code quickly in order to understand this. So the critical lines of code are here, and I can tell from the annotations, going back to good coding practice, I can tell from the annotations what these lines of code are doing. These lines of code are positioning the shapes, and they're doing that by taking some information from the table, and in this case 7 rows down, and taking that information and then offsetting from an anchor cell on the board sheet. So I've got the board sheet here, and then anchor cell on the board sheet, then offsetting or moving away from that cell. So let's go back to the board sheet, let's find the anchor cell, and the anchor cell is here, and that seems to make sense. So what we've done in the table is we've said move 7 rows down from the anchor cell, 7 rows down from the anchor cell is the second row of the chessboard. So just a quick refresher there about how this positioning mechanism is working. So the rook, well, the rook is going to be 1 row further down. The rook is going to be square A1 on the chessboard, 1 row further down. So what number will we want to put here? Well, we want to offset 1 row further down. So we're going to need a bigger number. So we're going to have 8. All of the other positions are going to be lined up, all of them on the first row. So I'm just going to copy the 8 down, Control C, Control V. And then these pieces, they're on squares. Again, we're going to offset away from the anchor cell which is up here. We're going to offset away, but when we're thinking about what column to put them on, well, the easiest way would just be to copy paste down the settings, if you like, for the white pawns. So let's just try that. There we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Seems to make sense. So for example, we're saying the white queen should be 8 rows down, 8 rows away from this anchor cell, and then 4 columns across to the right, moving away from this anchor cell. So the anchor cell is here. There we go, anchor cell in the top left. So 8 rows down is going to be here, and then 4 cells across, 4 columns across is going to take us to here, and that's where the white queen should be in chess. Chess players will know the queen always goes on its own colour square, so the white queen is going to go on the white square. So that seems to make sense. So we've just scaled up that table very quickly, and I think now's a good time to run the code, get this table working with the code, and then, you know, let's see what happens. And I think a bit of a theme in this series is not to be too perfectionist about the code. I find the best way to work through a coding task is not to try to do it perfectly to begin with, rather do a little bit, try it, get feedback from Excel about what's working, what's not working, and then scale it up that way, move on to the next stage. So I'm not going to try to do it all perfectly. I'm just going to, I've completed part of the table, then let's try to run the routine. So how many times do I want to go through the loop? Previously we just did 8 pawns, 1 to 8. Now we've got 16 pieces. So that's how easy it is to scale up the loop. So I've changed that to 16. Excel is going to go through the loop twice as many times now. So powerful working with loops. Going to have a quick look down this code. Is there anything I need to worry about? So rows down, engine, so offsetting from cell D3, offsetting from cell E3, seems to be fine. And then we're going to name the shape, seems to be fine. Okay, seems to be okay. One thing I would like to deal with just quickly is we'd like to delete the shapes. You can see down at the bottom here we've got a delete shapes routine. So rather than having to run that routine every time I want to clear the board, I'd much rather have that routine run automatically when I run the position pieces code. And this allows us to practice calling different routines, calling one routine from another routine. So I could just cut and paste this code into the beginning of the position pieces routine. You know, that would work fine, but this delete shapes routine, I might want to use it somewhere in another routine. I might want to call it from a routine later. So it's sensible to have that code separated so I can just easily call on it later if I need to do that. So rather than copy paste all the code into the position pieces routine, I'm just going to call the macro at the beginning. So let's say call, just check the name of the macro, call delete shapes. And when Excel gets to that this line of code, let's show you quickly using step into the F8 key. So it's got to the delete shapes macro, the call delete shapes line rather. Where does it go next? Then it's going to go to that routine. It's now in the delete shapes routine, working through that routine. There we go. So that's another powerful technique, calling one routine from another routine. You know, generally you want to avoid having really long routines, although undoubtedly in this application there's going to be some long routines, but they can be difficult to debug, difficult to maintain. Having a more modular approach, short routines, and then calling the routines, calling one routine from another routine, this is often a better approach. So let's just see what happens. I'm going to run through the loop 16 times, going to hit the F5 key. That's going to run through this code. And there we go. Okay, good. So the positioning, we can see here the positioning looks 100% accurate. So I'm happy with that. What problems do we have? Well, the text, we can see the text in the shapes is not yet accurate. So all of the pawns on the second row, it's accurate for those, but coming down to the first row, we don't want a P here for the rook, we want an R for a rook, B for the bishop, K for the knight, a Q, etc. So that's something for us to deal with. So how are we going to deal with that? Well, we don't want to do it manually. We don't want to click on the shapes and just change the text every time. That would defeat the point, really. How can we do it programmatically? Well, I think a good idea would be to go back to our table, add another column to the table and say to Excel, well, when you're getting the information about the position, the number of rows down, the number of columns across for positioning the piece, also get some information about the text that we want to appear in the shape. So let's just build up this table, use the same mechanism, scale it up, see if we can get it working that way. So let's say shape text. So for the pawns, we want a P, and I'm going to just quickly autofill down, Control D. So you can see the selection now. I've selected the cell, and I've selected the cells below that I want to copy paste the value in that cell down to. Not a great explanation, but you'll see. This is the setup you want in terms of the cells selected. Control D is going to autofill down. So this is the shape text, and then for the rook, we want an R. A knight, I think I'm going to go for N, although it should be K, but we're going to use K for the king. So I'm just going to go for N for knight. Undoubtedly somebody in the comments later in the series will pick that up, but N for knight is just convenient in this case, although it should of course be K, but we're going to use K for the king. Bishop B, queen Q, keep going down, and the K for the king, and then bishop and knight, going for M for knight of course, and then rook. So we've got our letters in there, and now we've got to think, well, how do we incorporate this into the code? So this is an important question, and let's think, what similar mechanism do we already have, and could we take that mechanism, copy paste it, and then tweak it a bit? So let's go through the code. We've got some helpful annotations in the code, of course, but what pre-existing mechanism is there that's doing a similar thing that we could use and tweak? So we're interested in what's going on here. So here we've got rows down, which is a variable, equals an offset away from D3, get vertical position. So that's exactly what's going on here. Excel has got the shape and it's going to the table and finding how many rows down, the positioning for that shape. So that's a very similar mechanism to what we're trying to do now. We want Excel to go into the table and to find the shape text information. So rather than creating something new, let's copy paste something. Let's recycle some code, copy paste it, and then let's get it working. We're going to need a variable then. Let's say shape text, an informative variable name. This is going to be a string variable. It's going to carry some text for us. And then, this is how easy coding can be. It can be easy. Sometimes, customers will look at all the coding I've done and it can look like it takes a long time. But if you look at the videos, I'm totally transparent about this. If you look at the videos, there's a lot of copy and pasting, recycling things. And that's a really important coding principle. Recycle things that we know work. So doesn't need to be stressful. Don't need to spend a lot of time pounding away on the keyboard. Just copy paste some code that I know works. Change this variable name to the new variable we just created. Shape text. And then we want to just make an adjustment to this line of code. So shape name, the offset, the anchor if you like, was C3. That's because if we look at C3, we've got the piece name information there. So the information we've just inputted, the shape text information, is the anchor point is cell F3. So fairly straightforward there. Okay, so we've got offsetting from D3. So D3 is rows down, E3 is columns across, and C3 is the piece name, and now F3 is the shape text. There we go. So completed that, put the annotation in so that we can understand exactly what the code is doing. So there we've just taken some code that we know works, copy pasted it, got it, tweaked it, and hopefully we're going to get it working for us now. So we've got this information assigned to a variable. Let's just go through the code quickly using the F8 key. Okay, it's going to take a little while going through the delete shapes code. There we go. Now we're into the position pieces code. And then just using the F8 key to step through the code. If we hover the cursor over a variable, over any of these variables, we can see the value assigned to the variable. So we've got the value into a variable, but we want to get it out of the variable onto the shape effectively. So again, what have we got that's doing a similar thing? Well, we've got some code here that's controlling the vertical position, changing the property of the shape, effectively positioning it on the board. So that's reasonably close to what we want to do. But what would we do if we didn't know the code, and I don't, off the top of my head, know the code for changing the text in a shape? What would we do? Obviously, you could go onto Google and find it, but we could just record the code for doing that, and then copy paste it into the routine to get everything working. So let's quickly record a routine. So developer, and then record macro, and then give it an informative name, change shape text. Okay, then we're going to go to a shape, edit the text. There we go, I've just put PC in there. Okay, and then stop recording. Always got to remember to stop recording, or you'll end up with reams and reams of code. Okay, so we'll have an additional routine now. If you record a routine like that, Excel will usually create a new module, and we've got module 1 here. So this is the code that we've just recorded, which seems like quite a lot of code for what we did. So where is the code that we need? Okay, it must be this text frame. There we go, something like this. Okay, it's going to take this line of code. and then drop it into the routine we're working with here. There we go. Okay, let's make a bit more room here. Okay, so we've got a piece of code here. Now it is coming back to me what the code should be. I think it's .textframe.characters.text is what we need. But the recording the code kind of jogged my memory there. Textframe.characters.text, and then we need to recycle some existing code to refer to the shape that the loop is currently working with. And we can do that easily by taking this line of code here. So this is the line of code that specifies the shape that we're dealing with here. There we go. Okay, and I'm hopeful that this is going to work. So, yep. This seems reasonable. And then what do we actually want to appear in what text do we want to appear on the shape? Can you remember what is currently carrying that? Where can we get that information? Well, the information we're put into a table here, but as we work through the routine, the information was assigned to the shape text variable. So we can just say shape text here, the name of the variable. So whatever information that variable is carrying, it's going to be transferred, if you like, into the text that appears on the shape. This is what we're looking for anyway. And let's say update shape text. Not absolutely sure about this line of code, but if it's not going to work, Excel's going to tell us, and then we'll be able to take action and fix it. Right, save the file. And then, okay, I'm going to step into this again, just to see if there's any problems. I'm going to put a stop in here, because this delete shapes macro takes quite a long time to work through. So I've put a stop in there, just click in the margin. That puts a stop in. And that means Excel will stop when it gets to this point. So Excel has deleted all of the shapes. It's run the delete shapes routine and it's stopped there. So now we can hit F8 and then kind of work through, and we can see what's going on in Excel as well. We can actually see what's going on here. Okay, vertical position. So there's the shape, horizontal position. Okay, and this is the line of code that's going to change the shape text. In this case, the P was already there, of course. So let's just, where is this stop? Okay, I'm going to just hit the play button a few times. Okay, there we go. Okay, I won't worry about that. Won't get too complicated working through things. I'm just going to run the routine. There we go, and the routine's there. And yeah, seems to have worked reasonably well. So we've got all of the right text in there. We've got the pawns, got the rooks, the knights, the bishop, the king, the queen, bishop, knight and rook. There we go. Seems to have worked reasonably well. So quite a lot of work we've got done there, but fairly straightforward really, just by scaling up a loop. The existing mechanism, the pre-existing mechanism, the loop is super powerful. We've just scaled it up. We haven't, as I said, haven't spent a lot of time pounding the keyboard or anything. We've just recycled some code that we know works. Didn't know one piece of code, so we just recorded it, copy pasted that in. As I said, using stuff that you know works, tweaking it, dropping it into the loop, and it's really harnessing the power of the loop to scale things up really quickly. Okay, good. So we've got all of our white pieces there. But now we want our black pieces, of course. So how are we going to do that? So actually give yourself a challenge. Why not stop the video here and then try to work with this code and try to create the black pieces as well. So that's your challenge. I'm going to try to do this now myself. So firstly, I'm going to have to scale up this table. I'm going to have black pieces now. Here we go. So set row 20. So we go to row 36. There we go. 17, row 35, of course. There we go. So I've got 16 black pieces now. And then let's see. I don't want to kind of type this out, although it might be quicker to type it out. But is there kind of a shortcut? Could we use an Excel formula to avoid having to type all these out again? Let's see what we can do here. Okay, I do have an idea using some formulae like len, left and right. So these text formulae. Just follow along with me. Okay, so this len formula is going to tell us how many characters are in this cell. Okay, so we've got 8 there. And then what I want to do is I don't want the W. I want to get rid of the W and replace it with a B. Okay, that's what we're looking to do. So let's say use the right formula now. So the text is here. And then the number of characters, well, the len formula in column G is telling me how many characters in the cell. So I want the right portion minus the first 2 characters. Remember, the first 2 characters is the W and the space. I don't want those. So if I say, give me everything apart from the first 2, then that should give us what we need. Everything is already in column G. So let's say everything minus 2. Okay, this seems to be what we want. There we go. Okay, good. And now I just want to tag a B on the front of that. Okay, equals B space in speech marks for text, then the and sign, and then the contents of this cell. So this is exactly what we want there. Okay, good. So yeah, it may have been quicker just to type that out, but rather than typing it out, we've been able to practice using a formula there, and we've got what we needed. So rather than W pawn 1, we've got B pawn 1, B pawn 2, etc., etc. So now I'm going to copy paste the values, Control C, and then Control Alt and V and V. There we go, copy paste the values, and that was exactly what I was looking for. These formulae I'll leave in the download file so you can understand. The len formula tells us how many characters in a cell. The right formula allows us to pick out the right hand characters, how many, and we can choose how many characters starting on the right hand side. There's also a left formula that allows us to choose a certain number of characters starting on the left hand side, and a mid formula that allows us to choose a portion in the middle. Super powerful when working with text. Anyway, I'll leave those formulae in. So we're building up this table. Okay, so the black pawns, well, thinking about positioning, remember in this column, we're talking about how many rows down. So we're talking about vertical positioning here. So the black pawns are not going to be on top row, they're going to be on the second row down. So we're going to have a 2 here for the pawns. And there we go. And then the other pieces, well, they're right on the top row. So that we're just going to have a 1 here. Control C and Control V all the way down. Good. And then looking across, well, the pawns, each pawn is going to be 1 column further across than the previous pawn. So again, let's recycle something that we know is working. Okay, there we go. And then, yeah, the same thing again, because these pieces, yeah, it's working in the same way. Each piece is going to be 1 column further along than the previous piece. So we've got a pattern here. Yeah, we've got a pattern in this column, 1 to 8, 1 to 8, 1 to 8, and then 1 to 8 again. So the pattern is kind of a validation of what I did there. So I just went back up to the table, and tried to see if there was the same pattern before. Then that's kind of a validation of what I've done. Okay, and then the shape text. Well, the shape text is going to be the same. So this should be easy enough. Control C and then Control V. Good. So we've fairly quickly anyway, scaled up that table. So now one thing we've got to bear in mind, Well, actually, let's run the routine here, run the code, and let's see where we get to. So again, for me, this is the power of loops. Change this number to 32. It's going to run through this code 32 times. Hopefully, it's going to place 32 pieces. I'm not absolutely sure. Going to save the file, make sure it's backed up, and then hit the F5 key to play it. Okay, and this is looking pretty good. We have a game of chess. Looks like we have a game of chess, but there's definitely a problem here, which is we've got two sets of white pieces here. So we need a set of white pieces and a set of black pieces. So again, you might want to stop the video. How would you deal with that? Could you deal with that yourself? We want the white pieces, the shapes to be white. The black pieces, we want the shapes to be black. So how might you deal with that? Okay, so the way I'm going to deal with it is to have two reference shapes. Remember, we've got a shape here. We can tell the name of the shape in the top left corner. Where does that fit into the code? Well, right at the beginning, there we go. Yeah, we've got ref shape dot copy. So we're copying that shape and then we're pasting it. Pasting it every time we go through the loop, we're pasting it onto the board 32 times. So we're going to adjust this slightly. I'm going to have two reference shapes because I want a reference shape for the white pieces, reference shape from the black pieces. I can quickly adjust the formatting of the shapes, and that will be reflected once the routine is run. That will be reflected when the pieces are positioned on the board. So I'm going to copy paste this reference shape, hold down the control key, just drag it across. Then this is going to be the black pieces. So firstly, we need to distinguish between these shapes because in the code we want, when we're producing a white piece, we want Excel to look at one piece, another shape for the black pieces. They're currently both called ref shape. So this one I'm going to call ref shape black. Okay, there we go. And then I'm going to change the formatting of the shapes. So let's have black with white text. So fair enough. Got the black pieces there. Now we're going to need some adjustments to the code here. So again, you might want to stop the video, think about how you might do this yourself. I'm just thinking about how this loop is working. The first 16 times, remember the table, we've got the white pieces first. So the first 16 rows in the table. The first 16 times we go through this loop, we're dealing with the white pieces. The second 16 times, so loop 17 to 32, we're dealing with the black pieces. So our logic could be, if counter, remember we've got the integer variable that's controlling how many times we go through the loop. Could we harness that variable in order to tell Excel when to copy the white piece, when to copy the black piece or the black shape? How might we do that? What would our logic be? If we could say to Excel, if counter is less than 17, copy the white piece shape. If counter is equal to 17 or more, copy the black piece shape. That's the logic. So before we've even got to the programming, before getting into VBA, we've got the logic clear in our heads. Almost like having a conversation with the VBA editor. Although that sounds a bit crazy, I've got a video on my channel about code as a conversation. It's an interaction between you and the VBA editor. You're trying to get something sorted out. You've got an idea. The VBA editor gives you feedback. So before getting stuck into it, having it clear conceptually in your head, that's going to make the coding a lot easier. So this is the concept. We've got to communicate that programmatically to Excel. Now this line of code that we're using to copy paste the shape, we're going to bring that inside the loop. That's because we want to be able to control within the loop which shape we're going to copy. Now we're talking about a conditional statement here, obviously, because if counter is less than 17, we want to do one thing. If counter is more than 17, more than or equal to 17, then we want to do something else. So it's simple conditional statement here. If, else, and end if, very common formulation for a conditional statement. So if counter is less than 17, then this is a white piece. So we want to copy the ref shape. And remember, ref shape is this piece here. We've just created a new shape, which is ref shape black. Yeah, so if it's a white piece, we want to do that. If it's a black piece, then we want to do something else. Now we want to copy paste a different shape, but the code is going to be almost exactly the same. The line of code is going to be almost exactly the same. So I'm going to copy paste that line of code and ref shape underscore black. Let's just, there we go. Okay, make sure the case is consistent there. Good. So this is what we're looking to do. Is this mechanism going to work? So yeah, you could step through the routine here, use the F8 key. This video is getting quite long, so I'm just going to play the code here. Excel is going to tell me if there's a problem. Save the file, Control S and F5, and there we go. Yeah, looking like we've got a game of chess now. So we've got the black pieces here, the white pieces. Just going to look through Queen, King, Bishop, Knight, Rook. And this all looks good. This all looks ready to go. So let's try to summarize what we've done in this video. So the previous video was the power of loops. This video gonna call something like scaling up a loop. So we've got a mechanism, a loop that we know works really well, and we're just exploiting that mechanism, making it work for us. So there weren't any really complicated coding concepts. There was no new code. As I said, I wasn't pounding the keyboard. I was just recycling codes that I knew worked already in order to do new things, but new things that are very similar in terms of the techniques used. Things like changing the text on the shape, and then just updated the table. So made the table longer. You can remember I used some formulae in order to accelerate that process, although I don't think it really did speed things up in the end. But we just made the table bigger and then just harnessed an existing mechanism there. So it's really, I think that's the main learning from this video, is understanding the power of loops, just how quickly you can get things done if you get confident setting up loops. And yeah, particularly really strong technique that I use all the time, really useful technique, is the interaction between a loop and a table in the spreadsheet. We've got a table in the spreadsheet, very easy to change information in this table. So we've got the interaction between a loop that's looking at the table, using variables, taking some information out of the table, assigning it to a variable, and then taking the information from the variable and doing something to the shape. So the interaction between the table is very easy for us to manipulate with the keyboard, and the Visual Basic Editor and the loop. Super powerful technique, and hopefully through this video you've felt just how powerful it can be, and hopefully it's motivational for you and it'll make you want to learn more code. Good, so I think I can feel with this series a steep rise in difficulty coming now, because we've done all the presentation stuff really. We've set up the board, we've positioned the shapes. Maybe we could have a couple of buttons here, you know, restart game or something, we can look at that. But we've got to start thinking about how do we actually move the pieces. And that's what I'm going to deal with in the next video, you know, first steps in that direction. But my idea at the moment, I'm going to think about this over the next few days, but my idea at the moment is first to get our program to understand what the legal moves are. So we've already got our table here with all the pieces in. We're going to delete the information in these columns, remember. We've got the information about the pieces, so I'll maybe extend this table, but I want to see all the possible legal moves, and in order to do that, we're going to have to explain to Excel for each piece what are the possible moves. Well, a pawn can move one row up or two rows up if it's its first move. That's going to be tricky to program in. A knight can move 2 rows up and 1 column across, or it can move 2 columns across and 1 row up. Going to try to translate that into VBA, probably using a table, and trying to get to a situation where we've got a table with all the possible moves. If we can get that far, if we can get all the possible moves, we can then start thinking about the really difficult stuff, which is evaluating what the best move might be. That's a bit further down the line, but that's kind of the long-term direction for the series. Thank you for watching. Hope it was helpful for you, and hope to see you in another video on the channel, or pretty soon in another video in the Spreadsheet Skunkworks series.